Another year, another highly anticipated IP movie that people are going to complain that the critics are being too hard on. Where the easiest defense is, well, at least it's better than the last one, technically. For the most part, the Garfield movie is pretty much what I expected it to be. A fairly standard family animated film. That does all of the things I expect a standard family animated film to do. Foremost, that it is well animated with effective, sharp comedic timing. Basically, that it has all the pluses of an Illumination film, including the cute factor. Yeah, the minute that trailer showed us Kitten Garfield, its fate was set. This movie was gonna make $500 million no matter how the rest of it turned out. But it also feels like a script that someone actually spent more than one draft on, even if it's still a pretty expected one. It has cute moments, it has a fraction of somber moments, physical hijinks, there's a weirdly affecting subplot about a tragic bovine romance, and its comedy is mostly functional, though every once in a while they do have an Illumination special, aka a joke that goes on for way too long, like its acorn Bluetooth joke. That aside, it's passable, potentially enjoyable, but just nothing all that special. Otherwise, this movie is one that I would fairly easily forget about, with really only one significant prevailing thought, which is how much this movie just doesn't feel very much like Garfield. And no, none of that has to do with the fact that he's being voiced by Pratt, who, as expected, does a perfectly adequate job, but it's not like anyone else with that cadence couldn't have done just as well, and Pratt himself has done way better in pretty much every single other role he's ever been in. But that's not really the point. It was never about whether or not he was the right person for the job, it was just that he happened to be trending at the time of casting. Garfield as a comic character made his reputation as a sardonic, bitter, lazy, complaining, grumpy cat, and sure, Garfield technically has a number of his iconic gimmicks in a material sense that it burns through in the first 5 minutes. Bill Murray's Garfield movies aren't that great, the animation is dated, live hybrid movies are almost inherently bad by default, but I can say that this feels like Garfield, even if it doesn't look it. More so, Garfield has accumulated his own reliable cast over the years, very little of which are here, and instead opting for a completely new cast of never-before-seen characters, including a long-lost father, which has never been a thing ever. So the effect is that this feels like a completely original film that would have been exactly the same if it had an original protagonist, only to have Garfield's skin stretched over it. Which, the more I say it out loud, feels like what might have actually happened given how terrified Hollywood is of things being original. Now, as I said, the movie is fine, I'm not exceedingly mad at it or anything, but I'm also not particularly compelled or moved by it. I was a big collector of Garfield comics, like, a decade and a half ago. So I am connected to this brand, even if it's not dependent on it, so I can't pretend that I'm not at least a little underwhelmed by it, even if I didn't really expect it to be all that great. And Garfield's dad, whoever his name is, feels like the kind of character created by Close Encounters era Steven Spielberg. My daddy had to leave me, but he still loves me. Come on, Garfield isn't emotionally hung up on anything that isn't food, which of course alludes to maybe the biggest betrayal of Garfield's character, aside that he is putting in way too much effort and is way too active in this movie for how lazy he is, which is that he hardly ever disrespects or mocks John. Though of course that element is missing from this movie because Garfield and John barely interact in this movie after the first 10 minutes. But I can also see a situation where they saw how much Garfield's online reputation and in memes, at least according to that one Super Eye Patch Wolf video, are so often based around how Garfield, being his self-absorbed and insulting self, is gradually decaying John's will to live. And so, giving him the Lost Kitten backstory, it certainly would make classic Garfield feel so much worse if he still treated John now with that same level of disdain, so now there's this appreciative kinship. Like, right at the beginning, there's this shot of him tucking John into bed with his teddy bear? That's adorable, and very not Garfield. Now, I know that there are some people who have gotten tired of the perpetually negative Garfield, so likely would gladly take one where he was a little mellower to both John and Odie. So honestly, what really kills it is that John is just straight up not really in this movie, and Odie's just a tag-along that you forget is there most of the time. The Garfield comic is the dynamic between John and Garfield, and it just isn't here. So like a lot of remakes, I could have lived with the changes, but I am less thrilled with the way that they did it. But whatever, the movie is passable, I just don't care for it much. And automatically assume that classic Garfield would have made me care more, but maybe not. Now, I don't know how many of you are that invested in classic sardonic Garfield or how this movie will hit with people, but it certainly has been a trend with people remarking about how much remakes are obsessed with preserving characters' likability when the result is often losing their initial intrigue. Certainly was the case with Avatar. But then, as long as the animation is better than the Garfield show, I don't imagine too many people will really fight it.